So I'm gonna.
Recording has started.
Okay, how's everybody doing?
Been a busy day, but it's been a productive day, even as a day off.
Okay.
Which
Today,
I know we don't get those really.
right. Yeah, I understand.
One of my mentors, he says that public service um, requires a personal sacrifice. So people who serve the public, it requires a personal sacrifice. That's leadership.
Well, you know what? I think right now, with everything going on, I can understand why someone would say that, especially, working in this environment right now with the COVID-19, and then, of course, people dealing with a lot of mental challenges. So I can understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, I know everybody already knows each other.
This meeting is
Gwen,
being broadcast on Facebook
I'm
Live.
I'm here. I just
it's
can't
okay if we can't
seem to
see
get the
you, but
camera
if you
to
can
work.
still hear me.
I
So
can
I
hear
sent
you.
everybody questions. I want to get started. Go, Gwen, introduce yourself because I think everybody else already knows each other.
Okay. It would nice if they could see me. Right. Does anybody know how to do this?
Gwen, it's okay, just as long as we can hear your voice.
Okay. My name is Gwen, and I'm Bridget's sister.
Okay, tell a little bit more.
Um, what would you like to know?
I mean, just a little background.
Okay. I work at the post office. Been there 39 years, and um, I'm in support of everything Bridget's doing right now with the mental health. I have a son who is going through this right now, so this will be very helpful for me as far as how I can go about, getting information for my son and
Uh-huh.
doing what I need to do to get him back on track.
Okay. I have one more person, and they are a mental health therapist, but I don't see them. So I want to go ahead and get started. Can you guys see me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, unfortunately, on my side, I don't see everybody until it's just spinning. So the first question, I actually want to direct this to Troy, and it's why do you think Black people's health is often misdiagnosed?
Just regular health, or are we talking about
Oh,
mental health?
mental health.
Well, one of the so having worked with all different types of people for in mental health for the last, I don't know, 10 years. Um, One of the things that's not taken into consideration is culture
Mm-hmm.
and also trauma. And uh, when I do diagnoses at work, I so when a person goes to a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, to get diagnosed for mental health disorders,
Mm-hmm.
they the medical doctor focuses on symptoms and symptoms only.
Okay.
That's the problem. And we have a lot of folks that go to medical doctors, whether it's when they're incarcerated or when they are, admitted into a mental health facility or even an emergency room for a mental health crisis. They
Mm-hmm.
get diagnosed by a medical doctor, which means they only take into account the medical side. Um, there's the appropriate way to diagnose a mental health disorder is to use everything, totality of the circumstances. You're talking about their psychosocial stuff that's happened to them when they were a kid, what's happening to them in their life right now, have they been incarcerated, have they been exposed to trauma? Because most mental health diagnoses that Black people, especially Black men, are being misdiagnosed with are bipolar disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Uh, they're not taking into account the medical, the psychosocial side, the psychological and the social side, and they're just doing it based on symptoms. Now, we all know how stigmatized bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and all these diagnoses that are really high in the Black population are. So we have to understand that misdiagnosing them can cause a great deal of problems.
Okay.
Um, Symptoms that mimic bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and all these other antisocial personality disorder are PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
adjustment disorders, all
Mm-hmm.
these trauma related disorders, whether it's interpersonal trauma, environmental trauma, generational trauma, all this stuff that's passed down, through generation, through experience. Those things, the symptoms of those experiences
Mm-hmm.
mimic bipolar disorder. They
Mm-hmm.
mimic schizophrenia. They mimic antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality, all these things that we as Black people tend to be, you know, labeled as. And in reality, it's the trauma. It's their life experiences
Exactly.
that lead to these diagnoses. So,
Mhm.
people don't realize that a lot of diagnoses they're markers, so they're passed down from generation to generation. There's markers in DNA that expose us to the likelihood of being diagnosed with these
Mhm.
disorders. But it takes something to trigger it.
Right.
What's the number one thing that triggers it? Trauma. So, or bad life experiences, however you want to look at it, whether it's adverse childhood experiences or they witnessed their father being, dragged out of the house, arrested, or they witnessed or experienced a police brutality situation, and we can go on and on down the line.
Right.
All of these experiences can lead to the manifestation of symptoms of certain disorders. And
Mm-hmm.
because those symptoms kind of cross over, if you
Mm-hmm.
look at the diagnostic criteria, they cross over. Sometimes people err on the side of caution in their minds. It's the worst thing to do, and say, let's diagnose them with the worst case scenario. That way they can get treatment, medication primarily, instead of dealing with the actual psychosocial stuff. So, the most common reason, to get back to the actual question, why mental health disorders are misdiagnosed, is because these behavioral health professionals don't take into consideration the big picture.
Okay.
That's the reason why when the DSM-5 came out in 2013, which is the new diagnostic criteria for mental health disorders, they included a cultural portion in there. And most people don't even look at that because there are cultural things, aspects of people's behaviors that mimic mental health diagnosis. For example, you look at the Native American community and how they use ayahuasca and all these different types of drugs as ceremonial, things. Their symptoms, they're hallucinating. They have delusional thoughts and actions. They have all these things that mimic psychotic episodes, but it really is a cultural thing. It's not a mental health issue, it's a cultural thing.
Mm.
Just like we, in Black communities, there's a lot of spiritual and religious influences in what we do.
Right.
People look at us and they're speaking in tongues. There's something wrong with them. No, there's nothing wrong with them. That's a cultural thing. That's just an example. So
Okay.
when you look at it from a big picture, if the system, health system, behavioral health system, medical system, because you can be diagnosed in just about every area, will look at the cultural aspects of it
Mm-hmm.
or the experiential aspects of it, there will be less misdiagnosis and there'll be better treatment for people like us.
Okay.
Sorry, I talked
It's
a lot, but
it's
that's
okay.
just my
I
take.
have another person online, Casey.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how you doing? I don't have your picture up. Can you just tell a little bit about yourself?
Oh, hey, how's everybody doing? Sorry for the tardiness. Was trying to get this app to work. I'm still trying.
No,
But
you're
my name is Casey. All right. My name is Casey Jordan. I reside in Mobile, Alabama, by the way of Detroit, Michigan. But a little bit about myself is that I'm very passionate about our youth and giving them a correct direction, a way to go, not what they have been taught, but the correct way, because some of our youth have been taught the wrong way, and to encourage them to drive their own path. I'm
Mhm.
definitely passionate about outreach in the community, and that
Okay.
is stepping outside of the four doors of the church and actually making a difference in the community to actually go and find and seek out the lost and actually interact with them and let them know that it's not about the building, but it's about who dwells inside of you.
Okay.
So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
All right. Okay, so I also want to introduce Warren McCray and Leslie. How are you? My brother-in-law. How you guys doing? Warren, your audio is off. How are you? Warren? Okay, he's gonna have to work on the audio. Okay, so I'm gonna go back, Troy, and I wasn't able to print, so if you see me squinting, because I have to look on my phone at the questions, the mental, how does the mental challenges affect the impoverished, the homeless, and incarcerated people with substance abuse? How does it affect them? And this question, Troy, and I wanted Casey to answer that.
Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me, Jet?
I hear you now.
Okay, we didn't have the mic attached, so we're good.
Okay. Warren, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Me? Well, not very much. I'm 22-year combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I'm also a technical solutions consultant. I mainly work with mechanical engineers and help companies become more efficient with engineering. I have some psychology training in college when I went to college, and I have a lot of real-world experience when it comes to psychological issues.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm just here to help out.
Okay. Troy?
Do I go first or Casey?
Casey, I'll let Casey start. Casey?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think one of the ways that it affects the impoverished is it becomes their mindset and it becomes their reality. When you see the same things every day, in and out, you start to get discouraged, and you become to live in your environment. You become to have that complete mindset of your environment. No matter what kind of opportunity may present itself, you've been in a situation for so long to where you think like, well, I'm just going to always be this way, or you're going to always speak negative into your life. When you speak so much negative, you begin to believe it, even when you have a positive opportunity that's directly right in front of you. And a lot of times when we're giving help to the people who may be impoverished, to the people who may be homeless, it's kind of like handout helps. Like we give them just enough to get by.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we have to do. In my opinion, we have to do a lot more of engaging with them, and also not just giving them things, but find out like how did they get to that point. We have to also educate them to where once we give them help, they can have a better arena of knowing the knowledge and the discipline of how to get from where they were to get to better than where they were before.
Did anybody have questions before Troy starts? Okay, Troy.
Well, Casey makes a pretty powerful point there about the impoverished, and I just want to make sure that it's hard to even answer this question without recognizing that this is a cyclical issue. You have to kind of wonder what came first, the cart or the horse. But the poverty generally leads to homelessness, incarceration, and substance abuse. So one of the things that the Black community tends to deal with a lot with is that poverty that leads to hopelessness, helplessness, and feelings of depression. So how does mental health challenges affect it? I think it just creates that cycle. It continues the cycle. So if a person's homeless, they many times will end up engaging in certain activities or in being in certain situations where they end up incarcerated or using drugs or alcohol to kind of numb the pain. But all of these things, all of these situations, homelessness, poverty, incarceration, substance use, all lead to behavioral health issues, whether it's depression or anxiety or they become victimized because they're living on the street, so they end up with PTSD. There's a lot of things that come out of just those situations alone. But to answer the question, I think that it enhances every single one of those things. Mental health does. So the longer you're homeless, the worse your mental health issues become. Every single time you're incarcerated, it adds bits and pieces to that mental health, because the separation from your family, the isolation, the PTSD that comes from what you see when you're in prison or in jail, that enhances mental health issues. Substance abuse is many times a self-medication piece that people are using alcohol or drugs to kind of medicate their symptoms because they don't like the way they feel. But substance use can become a disorder because dependence and addiction is listed in the DSM as a substance use disorder issue. So it becomes an illness more so than just use. So they're all connected, but I think they all start with some sort of poverty and some sort of like something that happens first, because poverty leads to homelessness and so forth, so like we talked about before. But I think the poverty is like the biggest part of that. Every single bit of our problems in our community, sometimes you can always trace it back to poverty. And the mental health challenges come from that. Literally, like a cycle of domestic violence, it kind of is almost like the same thing. It just everything keeps on enhancing each other and makes the other thing happen more often, and it just keeps repeating itself. And then you're stuck in this cycle, and this is where we end up.
So,
Yeah.
Tori, when you have a lot of people who, like you said earlier, they're being diagnosed with, could be schizophrenia, could be psychosis. Sometimes it's really not that, right? It could be
Correct.
the fact that somebody's phone.
We have an echo. Okay.
Okay, so how does like a parent, if they take their child in for mental health or even an adult, how are they able to distinguish that? If a doctor is telling you, oh, it's this, as a parent, how can you, say, no, I think that it's just the fact that he had a traumatic experience. How do you switch that conversation so that maybe they're actually getting like wellness help in lieu of having to take medicine?
Well, one of the things that we also don't recognize is that psychosis can be caused by substance abuse, for example, right?
Okay.
You use too much alcohol, use too many drugs, you end up having a brief psychotic episode or
Right.
substance-induced psychosis. And when they go to the hospital, if the folks that are evaluating him don't know that happened, that they were using drugs, because of course we as Black people, we go in the emergency room, we don't want to tell them that we were using drugs, right? We don't want to tell them that we've been drinking. So we go in there and all they see is the symptoms. So
Right.
just to answer your question, information is the power. The information that comes to the evaluating person is what's going to make a determination of what the outcomes are going to be. So parents who have young people, many times, so psychosis and bipolar disorder should not be appearing before the age of 17. But so say you have early onset of psychosis or whatever, these parents who have children who have experienced these types of symptoms need to be part of that conversation. In certain states, once they reach the age of 14, they're allowed to do these things on their own, which is absolutely kind of horrible, right? 14-year-old, 15-year-old is in the doctor's office and they're giving their own information. Parents aren't able to add to that. The kid's not going to disclose anything. So the doctor's going to act based on that. So the parents have to kind of like say, look, I have information. I don't have to be present during this conversation, but let me talk to you afterwards so I can tell you what I saw. I can tell you what I experienced, tell you what I kind of know about this, because this is not just a single episode. This has been going on. I've seen this coming on since they were 12 years old. And every single time that they get in trouble at school, every single time that they get disciplined someplace, every single time they experience a trauma, it gets worse. So you start giving information to help those evaluating people have a bigger picture instead of that medical model approach of saying symptoms are symptoms, so here's your diagnosis. So parents need to be more involved in the information gathering process by the evaluator. So that's the only way that's going to happen.
We just had another person join. Sean, can you hear me?
I can hear. I was here. I just couldn't see you guys, but I could hear.
Okay. Can you just give a little brief background about yourself and what you do?
I'm Sean Weaver. I'm a Navy veteran corpsman. Currently working in the Hood Bass Department in the VA mental health with the homeless team, and
Mhm.
from Saginaw, Michigan, which is about 90 minutes from Detroit.
The last part I couldn't hear you.
I said I'm from Saginaw, Michigan, which is about 90 minutes from Detroit.
Okay. And you're a mental health therapist at the VA, working with the homeless?
Yes, I'm a case manager with the homeless. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next question. And this is actually gonna be for uh, Casey, and I didn't know if you were coming on. So Tim and Sean, Branton. So you all get about 3 minutes because I'm trying not to go an hour tonight. Okay, so how did a tragic event like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment affect Black people and make them distrust doctors? And from that, what are the long-term effects? And we can start with Casey.
Okay. I think one of the things was it because that will make some distrust doctors is because the doctors lied to them first off about what the experiment was about.
Mm-hmm.
From the little research that I've done over the years, and just touching back up on it earlier today, it let me know that they were saying that they were just doing tests on bad blood, but it was actually syphilis treatments, and then to find out later that they had penicillin that could have helped treat it and cure the syphilis, and they still didn't tell them, let you know that there's some people you can't trust because they're doing it for a benefit to themselves. Like they said, it may be a cure for a lot of things, but if you have a cure for a lot of things, then you're going to put a lot of pharmaceutical people out of business. So it kind of puts that in the back of your head, and just for the families, it seemed like them for to get a little chump change when they had the settlement. It lets you know that some people do have a price on your life, that they do value and see you in a certain way. So it can definitely make you distrust doctors. For some people to say, hey, if you did it then, who's to say that you're not doing it now?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Because Tim, I think his
Yes.
audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So to be honest with you, I don't know all of the details about, the Tuskegee, what happened with that. I haven't read a lot of reports, so I wouldn't want to, as Branton would say, I wouldn't want to speak on that, without having done my homework. But what I will piggyback on is Troy, I thank you so much for what you shared. Uh, and you spoke like a true clinician. You've spoken like a true clinician. I keep it real, and I come from a different perspective, and as well as Casey's point, when we look at why this is such an enormous, um, why this has such an enormous impact on our communities is back to what Troy said, the poverty. We don't have the resources to train people who look like us to help people who look like us. We don't have the resources to send, our future generations to those type of institutions where they can learn. Now, as an addiction rehab coach, when I sit down and I talk to an individual who is caught up in the grips of active addiction, I can look them in the eye and tell them, man, I know what that feels like. I've been there. And so I can give that person that kind of hope that they can make it out too. I'm going to get their attention because, association, we have something in common. As they say in the program, the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. I think it goes back to what Casey was saying, getting out in the community and retraining. See, I put posts on, for an example, I put posts on Facebook about beating kids, and a lot of people say, especially in our culture, man, you got to beat them. My mama beat me. There's so much information out there that shows what kind of trauma, how that impacts 62% of the people who are incarcerated said that they were beat like that. And think about it mentally. if the people that love me the most would beat me, then somebody in the street doesn't stand a chance. If my mama beat me, I'm gonna beat you. And look, and these younger people are taking it to another level. So we've got to go back and we've got to unlearn some of these traditions that are causing the traumas. And to Casey's point, we've got to go in the inner city. That's where the majority of black people live, and we've got to start there. DC, the people in DC, they're not going to come down. They don't understand. To Troy's point, they don't. The people, these clinicians, most of them that don't look like us, they don't know what it's like to get beat with some switches, wrapping around you 3 times and putting whips on you. They don't know about that. They've been told, hey, sit down, Johnny. We didn't get that. And so, I think that, and to Troy, man, I love it. It's a vicious cycle. It's an ongoing. And somebody's got to stand up. We've got to be leaders, and we've got to stand up and say, you know what, that's wrong. The church has always been a very integral part in our communities, and a lot of, I'm gonna just be very blunt, a lot of our pastors are preaching what's popular and not what's principle. It says, we have to train a child, and I'll give you this example, and I'll shut down. When it comes to dating, right? Johnny and Sally are 12, 14 years old, and they have a boyfriend, and we think it's cute. Well, they are engaging in something they have no knowledge about. And a lot of times they come out of that scarred, and it continues on through their life cycle, and they have, unhealthy relationships from then on, because we develop human beings, back to human functionality. Our emotional makeup of how we're going to handle life situations are developed between the ages of 7 and 12. Is that correct, Troy?
Well, back up a couple of years, 5 and 12.
5 and 12.
Yeah, so, 5 and 12. Yeah.
So, and it's like, and I was told, this is what I was taught. It's okay to do a little wrong, just don't get caught. So when I did something wrong and I got beat, my thought process was, man, how can I do this the next time and not get caught? Not that what I did was wrong. I was 40 years old before I really realized that's some bad information.
All right, Tim, I want to go to Branton.
Until
want to go back
into the
Can you hear me?
Question? Am I addressing?
So when a lot of I guess
African American people
distrust
the Tuskegee syphilis.
So why do you think that is? What are the long-term effects?
I agree with everything that's been said so far, and I just add another perspective to this. Black people should distrust a lot of things. That's the truth of the matter, because it wasn't created for them in the first place.
Wow.
Anything that wasn't created for you in the first place is not going to have your best interest as a top priority. That's just practical.
Absolutely.
Intentional. That's just how the cookie crumbles, so to speak.
Right.
So, in a lot of ways, medicine in the United States never meant for us, especially from a corporate perspective. Now, we had our doctors. The great George Washington, I would say he was one of our doctors, specifically geared towards the health of a specific population. Now, I know for a fact that certain institutions were funded by certain families to research medicine for their families. Some of the great institutions that we look up today originally started with funding from specific families in order to research medicine for those specific families. And we have vicariously, some would say benefited, some have been abused through research, through experimentation, because it wasn't originally meant for you in the first place. You are the guinea pig. Now, with that being said, I know that sounds morbid and very pessimistic. That being said, if we can accept that truth and then move forward, I think things can be a little bit better. Because don't tell the person don't tell a person not to trust medicine when they should.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them the truth and tell them how you're going to counteract what they know to be true. Don't disregard the truth in order to get your point across. Don't disregard the truth in order to help. And I think that's in a lot of ways that goes in a lot of ways, not just with medicine, goes with education, it goes with a lot of things. Don't ignore the truth with the premise of you're helping. No, let's deal with the truth, accept the truth, and then explain how we are going to do better.
Okay.
Then that will help with the trust issue. Now, if you tell me that what I see to be true isn't true and that something's wrong with my head, I'm not seeing this, I didn't experience this, it's not. If you keep telling me that, I'm going to mistrust you. I'm just going to have a hard time trusting you because I know you're lying to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's going to help
Yeah.
us. I'm not a medical professional, but it'll help if medical professionals say, hey, listen, what this really wasn't geared towards you, but this is. This is what I've done. This is the research I've done. This is what I have sifted through. Yes, it's true. Yes, you should mistrust certain things because certain things have caused you to mistrust, and you should because it has negatively affected you. But here is the solution. I think if we can come to conclusion, operate with that premise, I think we can get a whole lot further.
Okay. John,
Yes.
what else?
So I agree with it's all being said, but then you have to take into fact that we have a very small percentage of people that take whatever the doctors say, their word is gold. They don't, and we have a small group that they don't educate themselves. So just because the doctor says you have this or you should take this particular medicine, that does not mean that that's correct. Especially with our elderly, they're set in their ways. They don't like to change doctors. They don't like to ask questions. So I encourage you guys or whoever has to, I go with them to the doctor. So the questions that they don't ask, I'll ask for them because they don't want to challenge the doctor. They show that as a sign of disrespect. But I think we need to challenge these doctors. That way, if we don't feel like they're being trustworthy, we don't have to take that option. You can always get a second opinion. You can always Google something or ask someone else in your family, hey, what do you think about this? So just don't take their word as gold. And you have them taking all these different types of medications that they don't necessarily need. So that's a huge problem. I know for veterans, we like to pass medication out like candy because that's the fix mode. But not everyone needs medication, especially some people react just from therapy. So that's what I see with the distrust. It's just a matter of educating yourselves, understanding your diagnosis. Just because this person's taking medication doesn't mean you need that same particular medication. So I just think it's more about education.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Georgette, can I add some numbers to what Bratton was talking about just real quick?
Okay.
He was talking about the research not being geared towards Black folks. As a researcher myself, I know that this came up in one of our research discussions. that only 5% of all medical research studies are geared towards minorities. The other 95% are geared towards the majority in this country, which are the white population. So you take into consideration just one example, high blood pressure and kidney function. Those are two areas where they've actually kind of focused on, because we have such high incidence of heart disease and high blood pressure, that they have found something that's different for us than it is for other people. There's different types of blood pressure medications that we have to take in comparison to the white population or non-black population. If you look at your blood results when you get your physical, there's the non-African American number and there's the African American number, because the ranges are different. So those are two specific areas where they've gotten smart. But if you look at the large majority of all medical studies, 95% of it is designed for people not like us.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
Did anybody have questions about what was discussed?
I have some comments. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Georgette?
Yes.
I have some comments on some of the issues that you guys mentioned. First, I want to say thanks for making this forum possible for the Black community, because typically the Black community has a stigma towards therapy. We think it's a sign of weakness to get help. White people get it all the time. They even brag about it. I talked to my therapist. He said I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have did that. When we're Black people, we're like, I can handle it, I don't need the help. I can deal with it. I've always dealt with it. And as a result, that's one of the first things that I'm glad that we're able to do here today. The second thing was the distrust of the medical community that you mentioned earlier. First of all, the training that goes involved in our modern medical system is kind of skewed because of the direct influence of the pharmaceutical industry in the schools that train the doctors. So then one of their main goals is to push their drugs. That's why if we watch it on the commercials, every other day there's a new drug coming out because they want to push their drugs. And then the doctors get kickbacks on the sale of the drugs, because my cousin used to sell drugs to the pharmacist, and then every time they write a script, they get a certain amount of money for writing scripts. And so that's why, if you just feel bad, they think you need to take a drug. If you can't sleep tonight, you got to take a drug. You don't feel good today, take this drug. So what they're doing, they're just pushing drugs on you. And then that's why that other gentleman talked about how we have so many prescriptions with the elderly. That's exactly what it is. They give you one drug, they give you another drug to counteract the side effects of the other drug, and meanwhile they're laughing all the way to the bank. Another thing in regards to the issue talked about, what do you do when you have you got a problem? What can you do? Well, you get a second opinion. Okay, you don't just go to one doctor, you go to other doctors, and you get a second opinion, and you look up some information and talk to other professionals for that particular topic or illness. With regards to the Tuskegee experiment, me being 22 years in the Marines, I can tell you experiments still persist today. Yep. Okay, if you think it doesn't, I could tell you some examples. Anthrax. Okay, we had the threat of anthrax attacks, so they came up with the anthrax vaccine. Guess what? They had us sign a waiver so that we couldn't sue the government, but they made us take these anthrax medications when I wasn't exposed to any damn anthrax. Okay, and then prior to when I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, the Camp Hansen, they have a lot of pig farms up there. And so what happens, the pigs would defecate, and the mosquitoes will land on the defecation, and they come to sting you. And so that's the leading cause of encephalitis. So they marched us all over the sick bay and had us sign this waiver and made us take shots on an experimental drug to treat encephalitis. Now that drug is being widely used throughout the United States. So does it happen? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Other things, like, for example, prior to deployment, there was a threat of a smallpox attack when we went into Iraq based on, they called him Chemical Ali. They thought it was going to hit with a chemical agent. And, some people can get that, some people can't. And I couldn't get it because I had eczema in my lifetime. If you had eczema in your lifetime and you get the shot, it can create a reaction and kill you. So I had to deploy in combat, knowing that, if I get hit, well, yeah, I just got to hope my corpsman would take care of me. And so we have a corpsman here now. Let me tell you, when the other last thing I wanted to mention was the cultural issues. The cultural issues of the Black community goes really, really deep in many, many areas. We too much to cover tonight. Okay, we talk about psychological problems. Just look at what's going on today. Okay, we all being experiencing a slight case of post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of fear of the police. Okay, abuse and fear of one another. Okay, I never gotten attacked or beat up or robbed by a white man. I got attacked or beat up by a black man. Okay, and the black on black crime and the fact that we don't do anything about that or protest about that is appalling. The other thing I'm upset about the Black community is that we turn on one another too much. You get a guy who finally gets some education and get a degree, or finally doing good for himself. They get under that mentality that they can only be once, and so they think he's a token black, and so they want to be the one to get the recognition. So I've given engineering presentations, and the guy who challenged me was another black man. So we have some cultural issues as a people. And we have some psychological issues as a people because of single parenthood, single parents, bad education in bad neighborhoods, poverty like you talked about earlier. I mean, the list goes on and on, lack of money, lack of therapy. So this forum is kind of nice to be able to at least broaden our knowledge and get a better understanding of some of the challenges our community faces. But what we have to do, we have to vote, and we have to go to the doctor and get help and try to deal with our problems. There's very, very, like, for example, I was watching a movie last night with my wife, and, they have these military movies. They always got some damn guy who's in the military, and they portray him as having PTSD, and he's some psycho. Okay, there's varying levels of PTSD. Some people turn to drugs. Some people can't follow authority. Some people can't work with others. Some people just have nightmares. Some people just I can tell you an example. I was in New Jersey about a year ago. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to take up all the time. But I was in Jersey, and in Jersey they have this area where they have a Muslim community, and they had this woman. Okay, she was wearing a full hijab, the whole crap. And immediately when I saw her, I thought, oh no, here we go, another suicide bomber. Okay, now that's a form of PTSD. No, it's not really PTSD. It's a form of survival, because if I'm not aware of dangerous situations, then I can be taken out by that person. So as a result of my combat experience, I know that these women can blow up. And if I had the picture, I could show you. It's amazing. But other than that, that's all I want to say so far. But I think you guys are really proud that we have some black men here that are being responsible and that's coming up and trying to do something for the community, because too many of us don't do nothing.
We're going over time.
Sorry.
All right, so this next set of questions, and I wanted everybody sending messages. A woman's women's perspective. So Gwen and Leslie, I want you all to answer the next questions. Okay? Okay, so I know.
Is Deborah on here?
I don't think she was able.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay, Deborah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We don't see your face, though. Okay, so I want to know.
I don't see anybody's face.
It's okay. We can hear you, though. Okay, so this is for the ladies. I want to know, how does it make you feel when your son, it could be your husband, nephew, is out and about, and at any given moment he can be stopped by the police? How does it affect you mentally? So Gwen, you can start. Gwen?
Gwen hit her camera. She was like, oh, hell no.
Oh, you know what?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I will be on my tippy toes until he got home.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm gonna keep it brief because I do have two sons, and as prime example, one of them grown left last night about 11 o'clock, and I couldn't hardly sleep. You know,
See?
I have anxiety
Mm-hmm.
when they leave the house and
Hmm.
until they get back, and I'm constantly calling them, are you guys okay? How you doing? Where you at? And you know, they're grown. So it's an issue. It's definitely
Yeah.
an issue.
Hmm. Leslie?
We feel very afraid for
Right.
our black men. You know, and it's a shame that we have to teach our children at a young age how we supposed to talk and act when a
Hmm.
police officer
Mm-hmm.
approaches you. Okay? I think that's wrong. Um, my son, I don't worry about him too much because I believe he can handle himself. I think we taught him well enough to know what to do, what to say, and how to act.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the violence that we're seeing, oh, it just breaks my heart. I have anxiety just watching the news, okay? And it becomes too much. It really does. It's watching, you know, the police choking someone. That could be
Hmm.
my son or my husband. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It affects me. It affects me. So
Deborah, did
that's all
you
I
want to
got.
add?
Oh, I already answered.
Okay.
Until he gets home, I'll be nervous.
Exactly. And,
Uh,
and you know, go ahead, Deborah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go
I,
ahead. You
I don't have anything more to say.
okay?
But yeah, I want to say too, not just to include the women, because I'm sure some of these men on here have sons that also
Yeah,
are affected too when their sons
Mm-hmm.
leave the house. I would like to hear
absolutely.
their perspective as well.
Okay. Let's go, Sean.
Maybe like Sean and Tim, if you have sons, how do you
Not
feel?
only my sons, it's just for me in general. I mean, anytime police is behind you, you're on high alert. You know,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
keep stuff, my documents real close where I don't have to really search for them. So I'm not looking through my glove box or any of that kind of stuff. So I was taught that as a teenager.
Hmm.
You know, put everything in arm's reach, and that way you're not searching and digging and looking all under the seat and stuff. So yeah, it is anxiety. I've been pulled over before in my own neighborhood. I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I was in my neighborhood, and I got pulled over, and he asked me what was I doing here, and I said, "What are you doing here? I live here." So if it wasn't for my neighbor, which happened to be a white guy, he came out and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" He was like, "This is my neighbor." So that guy wouldn't have came outside. Who knows what my story would have been? And I was in my neighborhood, 3 houses from my own house. So definitely on
Mm-hmm.
high alert all the time.
Exactly. Okay. Did anybody else want to touch on that? And
I I'd like to say something.
okay.
I know I'm probably one of the youngest people in this panel. I have five black sons, and you know, I've experienced the things that have been articulated here by others, but I can't help but get why we feel the way we do and the underlying reasons and how it came to be. And I've been recently restudying the Willie Lynch letter. I don't know if you all are familiar, but
Yes.
according to the Willie Lynch letter, all this is by design. We're
Mm-hmm.
afraid. Mothers are
Yeah.
supposed to be afraid for the life of their sons. So much to so that black mothers, by design, are supposed to emasculate their sons to keep them safe. Make sure that he's not aggressive. Make sure that he's not too masculine. Make sure that he's not out protesting and making a ruckus.
Hmm.
It's by design that has occurred and is occurring. And my question will be, if this was by design, what do we do to redesign? We don't want
I think
this.
that's
We don't like that we have to do this, but what do we do to change that?
what
Okay.
they're doing now in the streets.
I agree.
Mhm.
Something
Does
came
I'll say
anybody,
to
one thing real.
does anybody want to
I'll
touch
say one
on
thing.
that? Because I'm
I'll say
gonna
one.
ask, I'm gonna
okay.
ask a question about police reform after that, but does anybody want to touch on that particular question?
I'll just say this real quick. Um, one of
Casey?
the one of the hardest things that I had to do, and I had this talk. Me and my wife, we have 3 sons total, and one of the hardest things I had to do was tell them. I said, when I was growing up, my parents told me, if you get stopped by the police or questioned by the police, say yes sir, yes ma'am, be respectful, don't make any sudden movements, and you'll be all right. And I had to tell them, I said, even if you do that, it's not a guarantee
Is
that
that?
that you'll be all right. That
Hmm.
anybody can
That's right.
mistake you for this person or mistake you for that person, or even lie and said that they thought you had this or they thought you made a movement for that. So that was one of the hardest truths I had to give to my sons. And with what you were about to say about the question is, and that's one thing that we need to do to change, and that's get some of these laws repealed and abolished.
Hmm.
Florida in 2010, they had a repeal project where they repealed over 50 laws off of their books. And I think we've been fighting so wrong for so long that are we willing to hang in there and fight the right way to get the laws that protect us, just like it's the laws protect us to live, just like it's laws protecting them to kill us.
Exactly. Did anybody else want to touch on that?
And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to get rid of those laws because and make everything fair. And I think that's what the march is about, fairness.
I agree.
You know what's disgusting, I think, about that conversation that has to be had with young black men when they get stopped by the police is it's like what Bratton was talking about. This is by design. They want to have forced compliance. So basically, we are being forced to train our children to comply with authority that we don't necessarily agree with. So every single time we are now telling our kids, hey, make sure you say yes, sir, no, sir, make sure you put your hands. That breeds more trauma. So every single time they get pulled over, guess what they're experiencing? Trauma. And so I think that's disgusting that we actually have to do that because we're training our kids to one, be more afraid, which we are afraid enough at home, in the streets in our neighborhoods, but also being forced to comply with a police state, which some people call it, or that society that
Right.
put the implicit biases that are connected to law enforcement, and it puts them in charge of us, just like back in the slavery days. That's why we keep wanting to talk about that and how it's going to affect us long term. I think that is a problem, and I think that's something. I don't know how we're going to address that because we don't tell our kids they do the wrong thing and they get killed, or we tell our kids and have them live this life of fear and compliance, which they shouldn't necessarily have to. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
You are right. You're right.
And so
But we have to do it.
ask this to everyone. I was listening today about a lot of the black men who have been killed, and the lady said she was in a forum, and she asked, everybody to stand up, and no, they were sitting down, but everybody who recognized the name of someone who was killed and they were unarmed by the police, to stand up. So, she got to the women names, and she said it's almost like nobody knew who they were. A lot of the women who have been killed and they were unarmed. And so I don't know if anyone can actually answer this, but why do you think there's so many women being killed? They're unarmed, but we don't really hear about them. Because there's a lot of names she mentioned, I didn't even know who they were. Why do you think that is?
Call me a conspiracy theorist. I said before, I believe this is by design. So it serves a double function when we're seeing black men being killed right before our eyes.
Mhm.
It's a double function. I don't know if it's as intentional as it once was, or it's just a evolution of what was before.
Mhm.
Either way, it serves the purpose of what I was saying, the forced compliance, because who is more likely to be aggressive? Who is more likely to not
Yep.
comply? It will be your
Yep.
black and black men.
Mhm.
So we must
Mm-hmm.
just eyes so you see your black men what happens with non-compliance. It's not as, I wouldn't say it's for that strategy. Women showing women doesn't really serve that purpose. Now, if you put women before our eyes, psychologically, that's going to kick a protective function to gear.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you
Yes.
women being killed, you cannot manipulate forced compliance like we've discussed before. You're going to kick men over. You're going to, the world is going to look at it differently.
Yes.
So a line is being told here. Now, I don't think it's necessarily overt or as intentional, like I said, as it once was, but media cannot do that. You cannot do that. You cannot show the women. You cannot have the women out there as much as the men, because then you will create something you will not be able to control. And that's what I think. And the same thing goes with children, women and children. If you see too many kids dying, like you see these black men dying,
Mhm.
you will see something far,
Worse.
far worse than the so protest and looting and rioting.
Mhm.
That's what I think.
But one of the things that will also change is the laws. The laws would change pretty quickly. Look at the school shootings, right? You see all these kids getting shot and killed. How quickly do the laws get changed? How quickly do we kind of push the agendas? We also look at the way that society views women. Look at the history of being able to allow women to serve in the military. People are so against that. Like, no, we don't want to see our mothers and sisters coming home in boxes, that kind of thing. The media is not. They don't feel as sensitive about black men dying as they do about women dying or children dying. So taking the reason why they're not going to show women on TV or advertise it, so to speak, because if it bleeds, it leads. But if it bleeds too much, no, that's too much. Society can't handle that. You think about all of the media exploitation and all the issues with like the back in the days with Walter Cronkite and all of them. They would by design like skew the media to kind of only portray certain things because they don't want people to see that part of America. We don't want to see women die as a police. So the media is skewing that. I wrote a paper about this in college. It's one of the reasons why I'm pretty passionate about it, about the media exploitation. And it's like there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in media conference rooms when they're talking about what's going to show and what's going to not show. And this is one of the things that they don't want to show is women dying in the street at the hands of our police or in our direction from the president to send them overseas into war. They don't want to show that because it puts too much of a black eye on society, and they don't want that. And that's just my opinion based
So
on
they're actually basically hiding it, correct, from the news.
Well, they're pulling the wool over society's eyes. They're making it seem like we don't do this. It's kind of like domestic violence, and I'm sorry to get kind of crazy with it, but domestic violence and child molestation in families, they keep that stuff in-house. They don't talk about it in public. They don't bring it out because it's too embarrassing. It's too inflammatory. It's just going to bring up emotions way too much. So if you think about this, you put women dying on the news, just like when they just have the school shootings. They have no choice but to show the school shootings, but they have a choice when it comes to women. So if you have black women dying in the streets, or women in general dying in the street at the hands of police, they don't want you to see that. It's too inflammatory, so they don't want that.
Okay.
That's typically called propaganda.
Yes.
Okay.
Countries and our news media use propaganda to control the masses. If they say they have editors that and people at the top that have influence on different news media outlets, whether it's a left swing story or right swing story, it's propaganda.
Yes,
They want to control how you think. They want to control, but the problem is what's his name? Steve Jobs created the iPhone. And then they came up with Facebook and all these social media. So now, guess what? They don't have control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are starting to see what's really happening in the world. That's why you have so many white people out there protesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because in their mind, they never experienced racism, so they think,
Everything's all good.
it's not really racism. Blacks always complain about racism. They pull in a race card. Like it's not fashionable or something. But really what that is the lack of the country or the news media having control over social media. So as a result of that, people are freeing their minds, and now they're seeing the injustice, and the whole damn world is seeing it. And this is what's going to bring about change. Because these young people are the future. And regards to women, he's right. A man's natural instinct is to protect the woman. So you talking about getting infuriated. I mean, I just watched a video last night of a police officer who responded to a pool party that a black person had that we're supposed to have. And the white people wanted to tell them they wanted them out of the pool, so they called them niggas go home, your Section 8, go to your Section 8 houses, and then people come from there. And so when the cops was called, they immediately attacked the black people. Sit down. They was taking control of the situation, like he said. And the reason why they get so upset is like what that other brother talked about. They want to be able to, make sure you're submissive. So when you say, look, it's not against my constitutional rights, and you speak up against something, no, you're not complying to the master. So then they get angry and they be more forceful with you. I've seen them take a woman, just throw her down and do all kinds of things. And some of those cops, they got, punished for it, but they don't get. There's three types of laws, and there's laws for the rich and famous. There's laws for the poor people, and there's laws for the police. And the police have their own blue wall of shield, and they protect one another, they cover up for one another. And we have been victimized in this country since its inception. It's just being done in a different way, and we need to just educate our people on, unfortunately, how to react. In regards to your question about telling my son, me and my son discussed this. My son is 37 years old, okay, but our people can have a temper too. I mean, no one likes getting thrown up against a car and getting their face smashed down and thrown on the deck, talking about get down and all this other crap, and having a gun pointed at you, and you didn't do anything. So he knows to be, don't resist, don't mouth off at the police, because they have all the power. And that's what we just got to be aware of.
Okay, I only have room for one more question because of time. And this is in regards to police reform right now. There's a lot of, protesting going on with all of the killings. I hate to say it like that, but that's what happened. And of course, in some states now they're saying you can't do the chokehold. So with what's going on, and I know Branton, we probably touched on this last time, but what reforms should be happening? And I'm going back to, should it be the way that they're interviewing people who want to be police officers? What actually can they do we hope that the cops that are coming on board, they're supposed to protect us and keep us safe, but besides firing them, what else can be done? And we're going to do a round table. Everybody give your 2 minutes. And this will be the last question because of time. So Sean, I'll start with you.
I think to start at the top, you have to start with like the Constitution. You write these laws, you have a table full of white men slave owners writing laws that are still in effect in 2020. So now society's changed, the laws are different. I think it should be something implemented federally, an amendment to the Constitution, some kind of strict penalty put in place that is happens in all 50 states where you do not get a pass if you're in Florida because you can do that in Florida, not in Michigan. I think it has to come from the top because if you let it go in one state and not another state, that you're not solving the problem. You have to come from the top, federal, no questions asked, in writing, black and white. If you commit this crime, this is the punishment in the story.
Okay. Let's see. Casey?
I completely agree with what he just said. Like I was floored about 2 weeks ago. I just learned out about the definition of qualified immunity and why it even gives you a chance to get off whatever crime that you did. If even if you were wrong, if you had probable cause of like, yeah, I know I knocked on the wrong house, but I knocked on the wrong house because, and you could get off because of that if your reason was justifiable enough. So that's definitely, like he was saying, we need to get some of these laws. Well, we need to get a lot of these laws off of the books that's protecting them to where they can change it and start protecting us.
Deborah?
The police union. I think we need to do something about the police union and the things that they are able to do, and that's all I got.
Okay. Gwen? Gwen?
Gwen's probably gone.
No, she's there. I don't know if she can hear me.
Oh,
Gwen?
okay.
She's
I
on
can't
mute.
hear you.
She's on mute.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Branton?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Wait, let me.
check.
Okay, before I get to you, I think because I want you and Troy to be last. Tim, is he still on?
I had to leave.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Branton.
Like I said, I'm gonna attack this from a different angle.
Okay.
We want to customize something that wasn't created, like I stated before, with medicine for us.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the history of police departments in the United States, the first, I think, first police publicly funded police department was in the 1800s in Boston. Okay. The first police departments in the South were slave patrols.
Okay.
So this is how it originated. And it has evolved over time, and it still has remnants of what it was created for. And upset about it. Yes, we want it to change, but we're trying to, like I said, we're trying to customize something that is actually working the way it was supposed to work in the first place. Okay? It has to be stripped down and redone from the bottom up. There is no way you can put weights on it. There's going to pop up somewhere else. There's no specific policy change that's going to change the heart of the people, the heart of this institution, because the heart is created when it's created.
Okay.
That's when the heart is formed. Your heart is formed in the womb. The police department heart was formed when it was formed back in the 1700s for the slave patrols. And we are upset about the heart. We're upset. Okay, you're seeing this. We're seeing these problems. We're seeing what's happening as a result of this heart. And we're saying, oh, okay, we're going to change this. You can't change the heart. You have to create a new heart, so to speak. Analogy. So with that being said, yes, there are some things that can be changed, like minimize, doing away with qualified immunity, doing away with the police unions, but you're going to have, there's too many people that are going to be upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a majority that feels a certain way. And of course, as victims, victimized community, we feel a certain sort of way. Some people, there's a large amount of people that think police departments are just fine. I've seen numerous posts, comments talking about if they would just comply and listen,
Mm-hmm.
then they'd be getting killed. They say that with a straight face.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing I can say or you can say to change their mind. They believe it. There's lawmakers that believe it, judges that believe that, and there's a whole heck of a lot of police officers that believe that. There's a whole police union in just about every state that believes that. And coming from like in the last meeting, coming from experience, I know from personal experience that that is the heart.
Mm.
You get somebody comfortable. I've been the fly on the wall to hear people talk comfortably about what's really in their heart. So much to so that I'm convinced when people show you who they are, I believe it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay? We want to change that through policies and band-aids and things like that, and that's not going to change. What I think the solution should be is we should go back to policing the police. But it's going to require us to be a community when there's no crisis. And that's a problem with the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
We're a community when there's a crisis. When there's no crisis, we go back to our individual lives and individual ways. You can see that in families. There's some exceptions, but when did your family get together? At a funeral, right?
Right.
Every now and then at a family, you can see that most of the family at the funeral. When somebody is dead and gone,
Mm-hmm.
you won't see them for years, maybe even decades. You won't get a call from them because psychologically we have been geared to understand that it's safer for us to be separate because we know we've been conditioned that when we get in a group, that creates attention, and attention creates danger. And going back once again we have to go back to the common denominator, the psychology, go back to the founders of things. The Black Panthers policed the police. Of course, that was a problem. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
They took care of that problem. Okay, so what do? Evidently, it was working, but something was done about what was working. So therefore, it's not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? We say, hey, we can't do what was working because they're too strong. So they'll dismantle that. But at the end of the day, you are going to look out for who you feel is family. And that's the bottom line with the policing. When I look at that young man that I'm policing like he's my son or my brother, I treat him a whole lot differently. I think of that woman as my sister or my mother or my cousin or my aunt. I treat her a whole lot differently. But if I can disassociate the family connection, they become that's another problem. And that's what we're seeing propagate. They treat it just like another body with no human connection, because the subconscious prejudice that some people have, and there's some people that are consciously prejudiced, but they don't even understand sometimes what they're dealing with because it's been propagated and it's been cultivated. They don't understand that the reason why you're treating that man like that is because you really don't think he's a human being. You really don't feel a connection. That's the reason. You don't hate. If you go and shake his hand, you'd have dinner with him. But the problem is you really don't think he's a human being. That's why you're treating him like that. And that was now it would help if we had more of us to be in policing, but we don't want to be police officers for obvious reasons. Because once you become a police officer, you get this stigma. Now, if you're in Atlanta or a major black metropolis area, then it's a little bit different. But come on, Arizona, California, Nevada, Ohio, please, it's a little bit different. But going back, you got to accept the truth. Police departments were created to patrol slaves, protect the slave owner's property, or in the extreme East Coast, to protect the ships. Okay. So what was their main purpose? And with that being said, we also need to stop looking to others to help us. We have a self-sufficient mentality. We do. And we don't really we don't understand that. We look at the government like, why? Okay, the government needs to do this for me. The government needs to protect me. Everybody doesn't look at it like that. You talk to some other type of people, the government works for you. Look, hey, buddy, you work for me. I pay your taxes, buddy. You better get over there and do the job that you're supposed to do, buddy. We don't think like that. Give me one black man that will have the audacity to say that to a police officer. Hey, buddy, I pay your bill. I pay taxes so you can work. We know better than that. We know better than that. And if one of us is stupid enough, and I'm using it loosely, but if one of us did that, we would talk quickly that hey, buddy, you can't talk to me like that.
Exactly.
Like Bob or Larry over there that can talk to me like that.
Exactly.
Purpose for you.
Right.
And that's the subconscious psychology that we have to accept. It's wrong, but we have to accept and figure out how we're going to counteract it, because you're not going to change the hearts of the people.
Right.
We still need to protect ourselves, our sons, and our daughters.
Exactly. Okay. Joy?
The first thing I wanted to say, I mean, what Brenton was saying was that's really absolutely correct. But I wanted to make sure everybody understand what the Supreme Court says about law enforcement. Supreme Court says that even though the city of Los Angeles was created years ago, the whole slogan, serve and protect, and put it on the side of their car, like that's what's supposed to happen, the Supreme Court says that the duty of the police, the job of the police, is to protect and serve the interests of the Constitution of the United States, not people. They are not designed to serve and protect people. They are designed to serve and protect the interests of the country, of the state, of the jurisdiction that they work in. So the Supreme Court has ruled we are not required, law enforcement, to protect people. So that's the first thing. So expecting law enforcement to protect us, or expecting them to do what's best for us, hard to imagine, right? Especially with the origin of law enforcement, like Bratton was talking about, the origin of the prison system, which is basically a replacement for slavery. When slavery ended, they created the chain gangs and the prisons to basically get indentured servitude from black folks, which they were punishing through Jim Crow laws. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. So how do we make these changes? There's a lot of ways that you can throw rocks at it and hopefully it changes. We can go to the Constitution and change the Constitution and make it say one thing, but like Brandon says, you can't legislate a person's morality. You can't legislate their intentions. So every single law that comes up to try to police the police, they've always found a workaround. There's always been a Supreme Court ruling or case law that comes up and says, hey, guess what? You may be prohibited from doing this, but under these circumstances, you might be able to do it. You know, like look at Tennessee versus Garner, the Supreme Court rule that talks about a fleeing felon. You can shoot a fleeing. I mean, that wasn't designed for white people. That was designed for people that were afraid of the police and wanted to run away. So they were shooting them in the back. So they're running away. You know, you look at the whole history of Tennessee versus Garner. It was a black person in that case law. So we can't rely on law changes. There is the movement now of defunding the police, which I absolutely can't stand that phrase. The reason why is because it doesn't mean how it sounds. If you say defund the police, people are thinking, oh, you're trying to abolish law enforcement. No, They're trying to take money from
No.
law enforcement agencies and apply it someplace else, which means you should say reallocate the police or do something else. But that defunding the police has become the new rallying cry from the Conservative Party, basically saying, they're trying to get rid of law enforcement, which is not true. But there
Right.
are truths to what needs to happen in that. In addition to adjusting the way the 10th Amendment is written or applied, as far as states' rights are concerned, we need to have a clear understanding of what law enforcement duties are across the country, not state by state giving permission to to the state law enforcement of how they're going to apply their law enforcement. And a lot of that needs to give more protections for situations like this, because law enforcement has reacted to situations over the years to benefit the current needs. Let's look at 9/11, for example. We look at how law enforcement was funded after 9/11. They didn't have a lot of tanks and military vehicles and all that kind of stuff in law enforcement, so much so until 9/11. Your major cities started getting grants to buy law enforcement or military equipment. They were getting tanks, and they were getting high power weapons. They're getting all these different things. But the problem with large majority or large population cities with airports, guess what else is there? Large minority population. So who got the benefit or the on the receiving end of the tanks and the militaristic tough style of tactics and things like that? Well, black folks and minorities. So that's just an example of how law enforcement has adjusted over the years. But it's all built on what Branson was talking about. It was designed with a certain foundation, and until you can dismantle a concept and rebuild it into a concept that more fits the 21st century, it's not going to change. So the concept of reallocating funding to work more towards these traumas that are existing in our communities, these poverty that's existing in our communities, all these issues, mental health problems and health disparities that are dealing in our communities, then we can work more on prevention as opposed to intervention. Because law enforcement is a responsive intervention service, right? When something happens, they respond. But if we work on prevention, we work on teaching folks that corporal punishment is probably a really difficult thing to use when punishing your kids, because they grew up to learn to be afraid of things and people, and they also grew up to learn to be violent or wanting to engage in aggressive behavior. They're also dealing with the poverty in the community, because poverty breeds crime. And poverty breeds substance use. Poverty breeds all these different types of things. So we can reallocate some of those fundings that's been going towards militaristic style of weapons, militaristic style of whatever they're getting, these specialty units within law enforcement departments that are designed for crime suppression, which is disproportionately affecting, minority communities. Take some of those monies and apply it to something that's going to prevent the issue as opposed to attacking the issue. The result is one of the ways that you can do it. So this whole defunding the police is misleading, well, first of all, and second of all, it needs to be put in context. Let's take some money, let's take some resources and reallocate it. I don't like the way the LAPD did it. LAPD took $150 million from their budget and said, let's throw it to the community, but they aren't looking for a way to replace those services that they're providing. So now 911 calls are going to be, quadruple and triple and all that kind of stuff, because they referred to the Camden, New Jersey experiment, where they dismantled the entire police department and then they rebuilt it with community services within the department. Okay, that works. But what do you do in the meantime? City charters and state law requires that if you're an incorporated city, you have to supply policing services for your community. So if you abolish or defund the police department, who's going to respond to the services? Well, now you have more unfamiliar people policing your people, because they have to pull in the county sheriffs if it was the police. They have to pull in the state police if it was the county sheriff. So you're bringing in all these foreigners into your communities that really don't know your people, even less than the people that were already there. They may not have been the best, but they don't know your people. So now you may even increase the incidence of overreaction and use of force, because you have these people that are coming in that don't know who they're policing. So what do you do in the meantime if you're going to defund, so-called defund, or dismantle the police department? Because we as black people are some of the first people that need to call the police because of crime in our communities. So why are we going to defund the police and say, guess what? We have nobody to respond to your crime now. Sorry, you guys asked for us to defund it. So there's a lot of conversation that's going on in the communities that we need to say. We need to stop yelling these rallying cries if we don't have a. This is what these forums, right? These forums are designed to come up with solutions. We need to have a lot more of these before we start saying defund the police, dismantle the police, and oh wait, there's nobody to replace. Sorry,
It's okay. So, it was a great conversation, but I know we've probably been talking a while.
Can I make a comment?
Who's that? Oh,
You
Lauren?
know who this is? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You guys
Thanks.
talk.
Thanks.
I'm gonna stop recording, and then you guys can still talk. Okay?
What? You know, cut me out?
No, go ahead, Lauren.
There's two issues. There's two issues that basically two categories. One is a legislative change, and one is social. You know what Brandon said. Brenton, is that right? I don't want to mess up your pronunciation. I apologize. Brenton's what he said was right. And right now we have this thing called changing hearts and minds. So how do you change a person's hearts and minds? It's actually been happening. If you notice the protests, there's a lot of white people out there. Well, why are they protesting? It wasn't like that in the 60s. What's going on? What changed their minds from the way they were raised? Well, a lot of it has to do with sociological factors. Integration in schools. Some of their friends they know are minorities or black, Mexican, Indian, Chinese, whatever. They have had good experience. Maybe some of them may have been, have great relationships with other races and had a chance to get familiar with another culture. So we can bring about social change, but first looking at our personal example and our children and people we can affect so that they, show that, we don't meet those stereotypes that are portrayed by the media. In movies, okay, these movies portray us in such bad light, so they, the white people think we're all violent and we all go around killing people. So we could change the way movies are being made, the way black man is being portrayed, the way we treat one another and the way we treat others. And these, from a legislator's perspective, what we need to do, we need to have mandatory sentences for excessive force in certain types. Like if you choke a guy out and kill a person or use an illegal way of restraining and it ends up in the death of a person, well, guess what? You go to jail and it's mandatory sentencing. None of this good old boy network where they get off with pay and in the worst case he loses his job. Most of the time nothing happens to him. Better training, okay, better policing, more community policing, help them understand the community better instead of being fearful of everyone. And if you're that afraid to be a police officer, you need to get a new job. Okay, you shouldn't be a police officer if you're so afraid. Their records, their bad records, their history should transfer from one police station to another so that the oncoming police chief can look at his record and say, no, we don't want you part of our police force. We got enough problems here. We don't want your kind here. So that's what's also going on. The other thing is the rule of law. The rule of law and justice. The reason why we say equal justice, because if we have the rule of law, if you don't have a society with the rule of law and equal justice like it's supposed to be, that's why the lady shows a scale, and no eye means it's blind and it's equal for all. If we can really live those creeds, and if we can make that happen, we'll have a better nation. But what's happening is there's not equal justice. The police get off, the rich people get off, and we need to have justice reform for regards to prosecutors and defense attorneys. It need not be so money-centric. So if you're rich, you get good defense, you get off. If you're poor, you go to jail, you plea bargain, you go to jail. So those are some of the things we can do. What we can do now, what we can affect is by making sure we don't live up to those bad negative stereotypes, live our lives well and affect others, vote for politicians that share our beliefs, and support legislation and write out congressmen and write out senators to force mandatory sentencing and police records being public and transferred from one department to another.
Agree.
Okay, well, guys, it's almost going on almost 2 hours. So I appreciate everybody for joining me. It's so much to talk about. So I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't have too many questions so we can touch on like just 3 or 4 things because you all bring forth so many great things to think about and so many different perspectives. And, I'm sure even for me, I've learned a lot tonight, stuff I probably didn't even know. And so, I'm hoping, like I said, you guys let me know if you guys still want to do this every 2 weeks or once a month. But I'm glad that you all, brought forth something that we all could learn from. And you will be doing this again, probably in 2 or 3 weeks. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Juliet.
Okay.
Peace and
Thank you.
love. Stay safe.
Okay.